We're talking about the spirits of missing and murdered Indigenous women and the epidemic and the numbers of women that we're talking about is at a really critical and epidemic point in time.
Like a lot of the public perception is to make excuses of why these women are murdered and missing. The excuses are, you know, they were asking for it. They were on drugs. They were drunken. They were selling themselves on the street. They were hitchhiking, so it's their fault.
Indigenous women and allies have experienced a significant amount of obstacles while attempting to bring attention to this crisis. They experience societal racism, victim blaming in the media, government indifference, and a lack of priority, even within Indigenous organizations. But they persisted. After several years of advocacy and support from allies, Amnesty International and the Native Women's Association of Canada were able to gain national attention on the crisis after several key reports. Amnesty International's No More Stolen Sisters is a global movement working to expose and prevent human rights abuses. Stolen Sisters has highlighted racism as the root cause of this crisis, as it leads to social indifference and a deprioritization with regards to police protection. Various United Nations organizations called for Canada to investigate and address this crisis. As the will of the families, communities, and nations who were impacted grew stronger, so did the calls for national inquiry.
Former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper asserted that the violence is not part of a sociological phenomenon, and crimes are best handled by the police. His government's position was that there was no need for further study. During the 2015 federal election, the Liberals and the NDP campaigned on a pledge to launch a national inquiry. In December, the newly elected Liberals started a pre-inquiry consultations, which were conducted across the country over the course of 3 months. On August 3rd, the government released the terms of reference and named 5 commissioners.
Starting September 1st, BC Judge and Chief Commissioner Marion Buller will lead 4 other commissioners: First Nations advocate Michelle Audette, Ottawa lawyer Kayak Robinson, Métis professor Marilyn Putra, and the lone male commissioner, human rights lawyer Brian Yulfson. Their monumental task over the next 2 years, helping to end the disproportionate violence faced by Indigenous women and girls. The government says they've budgeted $53.8 million to examine systemic issues and propose concrete solutions. But some are already worried the commissioners weren't given the mandate they need to seek justice for families.
The ministers refused to include a specific directive with regards to the role of police.
The commissioners are also limited in what they can do. They cannot reopen investigations or jeopardize ongoing cases. If evidence of criminal activity is found, they are strongly encouraged to pass the information off onto appropriate authorities.
We do have some concerns that there is not a clear opportunity for families to pursue reopening cases through the justice system. The Justice Minister announced a significant amount of funds for family liaisons, but they are going to be supporting families to get answers and information through, from what we understand, victim services. And these families were not looking for additional supports in terms of victim services. They were looking for answers in cases that were not handled appropriately. So there's great concern among the families that they might not be able to get the answers they needed.
Recommendation 7 of the inquiry affirms the necessity of bearing witness to the experiences of and the losses by family and community members who will give evidence through stories. Over 40 Indigenous women leaders, family members of murdered and disappeared women, academics, allies, and human rights experts raised this as an issue at the January 2006 symposium hosted by the Native Women's Association of Canada, the Canadian Feminist Alliance for National Action, and the Canadian Journal of Women in the Law.
Mr. Speaker, families need the Murdered and Missing inquiry to be successful, and we recognize that the hearings are happening this week in Whitehorse. But what's happening after that? They're shutting down for the summer. Does the minister not recognize what so many others recognize, including the Justice Minister's father, that there is serious problems with this process? What is she going to do to fix it?
bit much coming from a party that opposed this commission for the whole of their mandate.
With the national inquiry up for a serious reformation, reclamation and community building have been a significant source of healing within Indigenous communities. With no real support from the government, families and friends of missing and murdered women, girls, and two-spirited people have been raising concerns about the prevalence of this violence and formed grassroots and community organizations across Canada. They created spaces for investigation, advocacy, and honor for those who have been lost by giving credence to their everyday engagements with hope, desire, humor, and possibility, while acknowledging the ways disadvantage and structural inequality undermine Indigenous lives.
So if people will come in and on their left side there'll be a box. It's a cedar bentwood box that's been beaded and made by people in Haida Gwaii and sent here. And they can take the tobacco and walk around and put their prayers into the tobacco, much the same way you would put prayers into tobacco around a sacred fire. And then you walk clockwise around the exhibit space. And at the end of the path, there's another box to be able to place the tobacco. And at the end of the exhibit, the elders are advising the keepers of the vamps on what to do with everybody's tobacco. So it's treated, everything follows traditional protocols. Everything we do is following instructions from elders. We're bringing Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous ceremonial practices into this space, because what we're doing here is not an exhibit. Even though I use the word an exhibit, it's not an exhibit. It's a memorial, it's a commemoration, and it's ceremony. It's ceremony from the very start to the very end of each and every display, in the sense that from the very beginning this space is smudged, the elders are present, we hold circles in the morning, pipe ceremonies, circles in the evening. The whole thing is ceremony, and that's what's required in order to properly acknowledge and honor the women's lives. We can't do it by gawking. We can't do it by seeing pictures. We can't do it by staring from an outsider's perspective. We must do it by bringing their lives and the acknowledgement of the value of their lives within us and within our hearts.
There's a direct relationship, and I want to share this with you. We use wampum belts as part of our oral history and part of our understanding of who we are. And this is about the role of women in our culture. This is called the Women's Nomination Belt. So we had hundreds of treaties that were used to recognize and to remember our history. And this is just a very tiny bit of that oral history, because I want to talk specifically, and it's directly related. And this was about the strength of women in our culture and the role of women in being leaders and being respected and honored for her role and her responsibilities in our culture. She chose leadership. She was a leader of her clan. She's a leader in her family. And everybody respected her. She's honored so much and respected so much. And do you know why? It's because we're the ones that bring babies. We're the ones who bring nationhood. So they're honored and respected because of that. You know, I had the honor to, maybe, I don't know if it was an honor or not, but I was able to stand on the floor of the House of Commons and respond to that apology. And you know what it was like? It was like talking and facing an abuser. Because that colonization is still happening, it's still occurring. You can apologize, but what actions follow that? What actions follow it so that I trust you? There's still too many missing and murdered Indigenous women. There's a lot of men, a lot of Indigenous men, girls and boys who are going missing and found murdered. But the reason why I focus on Indigenous women is because of what I said earlier, that we're losing our nationhood. So in the sense of how we can address this, because that's what I'm always looking for is solutions, is for all of us to take responsibility and for you to tell me that you will act.
What we really need to see is more of an outcry from the regular Canadian people, because these are the people that these politicians are listening to and that have power with these politicians. And there needs to be more outrage, because it is outrageous what's happening. And the fact that people aren't saying anything about it, are pushing it to the wayside and saying, oh, just shut up, like you're having a rally, oh, like I need to go to the store, why are you slowing me down? You know, instead of taking that ideology, say yes and come together with us and hold hands as women and as people, you know, because this is the only way that we can move forward. We have to make those connections with each other. And because this isn't right. Every human has value. Every human life has value.